Hello everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on Secure Productive Enterprise. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to the folks joining from different parts of the globe. My name is Noor Basha, Marketing Lead at Winwire Technologies, and I'll be your moderator for today's webinar. So today's topic for the session is enabling digital transformation with Secure Productive Enterprise. So SP is Microsoft's most trusted, secure, and productive way to work that brings together best of Office 365, Enterprise Mobility plus Security, and Windows 10 Enterprise. So before we start, let me highlight few housekeeping items. During the webinar, please feel free to post questions, and we will try to answer as many as we can at the end. We are recording this session and we'll share the recording to you in next 24 to 48 hours. So let me take this opportunity to introduce you to today's wonderful session speakers, Michael McGill. We call him Mike. Mike brings over 20 plus years of technical experience, and he's a product management and has product management and consulting experience. At Microsoft, he works directly with customers, providing guidance on the power of choice between on-premise, hosted, and hybrid solutions for Office 365. We also have Jim Bond, who is the solution specialist for enterprise mobility and security at Microsoft. Jim has been with Microsoft for the last 12 years and was involved in various sales roles, right from supporting System Center, Windows Server, and Windows Desktop operating system. So we also have Vineet, who is the Chief Technology Officer at Winwire Technologies, and he has over 20 plus years of experience in the IT industry. Vineet is Microsoft Azure Certified Architect and Microsoft Virtual Technical Specialist, helping Microsoft Technical Sales team as a part of the Managed Partner Program. So without making further delay, let me hand it over to Vineet to take the session from here.
Thank you very much, Noor. Welcome, everyone. As Noor said, we are going to be talking about secure, productive enterprise today. And that's something that I will start with the introductions. And then I'll hand it over to Mike and Jim to talk more from Microsoft's perspective, how SPE, as it is called in short, is available to you as customers in your organizations. We will have, I'll come back and talk about how we as a managed partner with Microsoft have offerings that we can help you leverage all the features and functionalities of SPE Suite. We will certainly have a Q&A session at the end, but please feel free to reach out to us even later after this webinar on any other queries that you may have. We'll be more than happy to answer. I believe, as you may have seen in the introductory email that was sent, the invite email, we are covering SPE as a suite which is more focused on bringing all the best solutions, software, and adding on the security focus from Microsoft into one suite. So in short, right, and that's just what I'm going to bring it up, is when you hear about secure productive enterprise, that's Microsoft's way of packaging all the solutions, but adding a lot of different security elements on top of it. Not only security, compliance elements on top of it, and we will be covering many of those as we go through this slide deck. Important thing to note is that Office 365 is core solution, which I'm sure many of you are already using, but there are other technologies that fall under secure productive enterprise. But before we go into the various components, and Microsoft team, Mike and Jim will talk about those, let's look at what is the business case for having something like secure productive enterprise as a suite available out there. There are 4 pillars that we need to really talk about. One, and the first and the foremost, right, assuming many of you are part of the security group, right, the idea is for making sure that you are securing everything that is there in your organization. And that's the trust pillar. Of course, there are elements and solutions that you need for collaboration. Mobility is so pervasive, you need to have people have access to the right apps and the devices. And of course, nothing happens unless and until you can actually make sense out of it and improve the way you are doing things, right? These are the four pillars which form the basis of creating a secure productive enterprise as a suite. I'll cover certain elements that I think you can relate to very well. All of you are in different roles in your organizations, and then we will be able to see what are the features, functionalities on the Microsoft platform that address many of these needs. Let's start with trust, right? As I said, this is the most important element that comes to every chief security officer's mind on enabling, right, security while continuing to have people be productive, make sure that their data is secure, their access is secure, and of course having the other groups. And these are the groups that I am sure you can relate to. The security group, which is the one that is in charge of making sure your data, your apps, and your platforms are secure, right? But also work behind the scene to identify if there is something going on in terms of any attacks or any activities that are not in line with the security principles that you have established and how to mitigate those. Legal department, of course, needs compliance, more focused on e-discovery, and I'm sure there are several e-discovery solutions over the years that have been created. Microsoft itself on its platform has had and has been continuing to evolve the e-discovery features and functionalities that are meeting your newer and newer needs in the organization. HR, of course, always wants to make sure that the data that they are managing and storing in their organizations are secured, right? Their employee data is not shared outside the organization. And finance, of course, wants to make sure that all the information that they're working on is, including their customer information around invoicing and everything else, is only controlled by the organization. And this is a theme that you will see going forward for the business groups that we are talking about here under the trust pillar, right? There are these three technology areas, right? Everything around the core Windows platform, the Office 365, which is the exact, which is the basis of the collaboration environment, and then all around enterprise mobility and security. What are the various tools and technologies that are available? Under Windows 10, which is what security group is using, there are advanced threat protection, which is built into the Windows platform and helping the security groups make sure that they are able to track and address any of the issues that may come up. There is certainly no infrastructure that is required because it's supported by the cloud. There is no infrastructure that needs to be managed, and it is certainly helping not only emails, but your data and your operating systems. As we talked about HR and legal, there are other features in Office 365 around advanced e-discovery, which legal departments can use. Customer lockbox, which is where, of course, you're managing your employee information on Office 365, which is hosted on a Microsoft data center. How do you ensure that Microsoft itself and the employees that are working do not have access to that? That's where customer lockbox comes into the picture. Only in extreme cases where there is an explicit permission given by the customer for troubleshooting reasons, will anybody else have access to it? Otherwise, your data is secured and safeguarded, even if it is hosted on the Microsoft platform. Advanced threat protections are the security features built into Office 365 that help manage the data and the apps that you're talking about. But that's not only enough, right? As we grow more into the cloud-based hosting of data and other apps, there are features and functionalities around enterprise mobility, which is the EMN plus S, which is the new name that you will hear, around making sure that your data that is being exchanged, that is being within the organization, outside the organizations, you can classify them, you can encrypt them. You may be able to send some data to some folks, but not allow them to print it or not allow them to forward it further, right? There are protections that you can establish as a part of the SPE suite. Of course, once that is being set up, you need to always analyze how are users really, how is that really working, right? How are users really sharing the information, and if there are patterns that you need to identify, which is the behavioral analytics available for the advanced threat detection. Now, this is, as I said, just one of the most important pillars, and you will see how many of these features and functionalities are brought together to make sure that all your collaborative and mobile and emails and all the other applications and systems are secured. Moving on to something that I'm assuming you all are already using to a certain extent. People like to collaborate on documents. People like to collaborate on meetings. People, of course, have a lot of these features that they've been using in Office 365. But as we look at security around some of the key areas, right? So marketing looking at Skype meeting broadcast, where they want to do company events, where they're talking about either product launches and making sure that they're in a secure fashion able to have communications within the organization. The Skype meeting broadcast with all its features comes into the picture. Over the last few months, if you have looked at PSTN conferencing, which is where even the Skype for business, which has been the enterprise version of Skype, has the capability to integrate your PSTN calling into the same meeting. So people could be joining from the laptops, from mobile devices, but also being able to dial into the same meeting. And operations, of course, needs to make sure that whatever financial or customer data that they are managing, right, even for their customers, is secure. So you will see elements, and I'm going to build this up within these three buckets again. Windows 10 itself provides a lot of data protection at the core, at the operating system level itself. There are features like credential guards where you are able to provide whatever you're logged in as, not to every app, but only on permission basis, that certain apps that are running in your environment can know who you are and get access to your credentials. As I already talked about, PSTN and Skype for meeting for broadcast are features built into Office 365, which allow you to, in a secure fashion, collaborate with the rest of your organization. Something that many of you, again, may already be using is Azure Active Directory Premium. Every Office 365 environment has an Azure Active Directory behind the scene, but the premium version is where it actually takes it to the next level to make sure that you can manage your user information and also even in a hybrid manner, protect what all applications that you're deploying in your environment, how do you secure them, and how do you make sure that people, only the authorized people are able to use those. Moving on to the next pillar, which is something, again, very important, is around mobility, right? This is certainly not something new, but security around mobile devices and the data and the apps that you're running in is certainly something which is important to manage. Intune, as you may have heard about, that's one of the first products, Microsoft Intune, which has been there for a while, help you manage not only your laptops and desktops, but also your iOS, your Android, your Windows, and even your Mac devices and MacBooks that may be there within your organization. That's certainly one of the key components that security organizations use to make sure the apps and the data that are running on those corporate devices, how you can classify them, how you can encrypt them, and make sure that you use Azure Information Protection when the data is being exchanged outside the organization. This is a feature that, of course, has evolved over many, many years. Windows used to have it at the Windows Server level, and now you are able to have the encryption of your data that you're sending and sign it so that only the intended recipients and intended people are able to review it. Even if it is forwarded to other parties, they are not going to be able to read or access that. There are also capabilities built to separate your corporate and personal data in that security organizations can manage. Sales and operations, of course, need to make sure that apps that they need to be more productive are available on those devices, but the organization should also have the mechanics to manage those apps and devices, do a remote wipe if required, do a selective wipe of certain apps that were only required by the organization if the device is lost or if the employee leaves the organizations, many of those elements. Last but not the least is, while we are talking about all these collaborative functions, all the elements of having mobile access, it is very important to look at how are these applications, how are these settings that you have provided being used, right? Yeah. You have Power BI, which is the platform to make sure that you are able to look at your business data. You're also able to look at your security data about how am I performing as an individual, as a team, as an organization. Of course, finance, sales, marketing, all these groups can really leverage all the features of Power BI. At the same time, you do need to make sure that the data that is being accessed in that environment is being protected. Again, Microsoft Intune comes into the picture, where you will enable secure access to the data, so that while Power BI is providing you rich visualization of how my organization is performing or a particular department metrics are performing, you need to make sure that people have the access to the right amount of data and right type of data, and only for what they are authorized to. So all of these various tools and technologies that you talked about, security is paramount, and security is making sure security and security configurations are very, very important. As we go along, we'll talk about how you can manage many of these security settings, compliance needs that you have in the organization, but the important part is putting them all together under a secure productive enterprise suite makes them work very well together. And this is the place where I'll hand it over to Microsoft team, Mike and Jim, to give you a little bit more insight into how they have planned to combine these various technologies and bring it to you, what are the various options that are available as a plan, and talk a little bit more from their perspective on how those tools and technologies help you in securing your enterprise. Mike, I'll hand it over to you to take it from here.
Great. And I assume you're going to eventually change the slides for me, but one thing I just want to mention is Secure Productivity Enterprise is a combination of Office 365 and the E5 investments that we've made in security, Power BI, and Skype. So Microsoft has invested over $1 billion in this last year in security, along with the Enterprise Mobility Suite, focused on mobility and identity and protecting those mobile workforce, and along with Windows 10 Enterprise. Go ahead and change slides. So I'm going to start here by talking a little bit about some of the capabilities in Office 365. So obviously with Office 365 you have the power of co-authoring in a secure environment, whether you're using the rich Office clients or the online versions of Office, along with the rich capabilities of mail and socials using Exchange Online and Yammer, and also things like Microsoft Teams that we are launching shortly, along with end-user cloud storage using OneDrive for business, also SharePoint for document storage and team collaboration, and Delve, which allows you insight into what's going on around you, which is more of the modern day kind of my-site capability that we've seen in the past with SharePoint. Along with the exciting advancements with Skype for Business. So we have quite a few enhancements around voice in the cloud, full PBX capabilities, along with PSTN conferencing capabilities, allowing people to connect with their own dial-in numbers into meetings. And then last but not least, Power BI has been a really important asset to businesses and being able to view their data, do analytics on that data, along with Delve Analytics, looking at your own personal day in life in productivity and seeing how that's how you're being productive. And one of the advantages, obviously, is with Office 365 is always being up to date and allowing companies to focus on their core business objectives. Next slide.
All right, I think this is me.
Yeah.
So I'll take it over from here. This is Jim Bond. Thanks a lot, Mike. I appreciate it. And as Vineet mentioned at the top of the broadcast, I'm a solution specialist here at Microsoft for our security and mobility solutions. And this has been a very hot topic with our customers. Security in general is a very hot topic with our customers. You know, we've all seen the headlines, and I'm assuming that lots of folks on the call today have even experienced possibly some breaches and had you know, issues that have kept you up at night around security. And Microsoft, as Mike indicated, Microsoft is maybe one of the biggest security companies that you've never heard of. What I mean by that is that, as he mentioned, we're spending $1 billion annually, and that's in the form of acquisitions, but also R&D, of course. So we are building out our tools across the stack, and security is very, very broad and deep within the Microsoft stack. The Enterprise Mobility and Security suite itself is really built around an identity-centric approach to security. Okay, so what does that mean? So of course Microsoft has had a foot in the identity world for some time now, of course, with Active Directory domain services being in market for many, many years now. What the market has seen over the past, say, 6-7 years or so is a move from device-based approaches to security to identity. Now, you're probably all familiar, and I'm sure some of you are running tools to lock down the devices that you have to manage. Those devices could either be corporate managed or corporate issued and owned devices, or more and more they are personally owned devices. And they're not necessarily managed by your corporate team, corporate security team, and you still have to be responsible at the end of the day for what happens on those devices, and in particular, where the data on those devices ends up. All right, so we'll talk about that, because that's an important piece. The device-based approach to security has done a good job for years of making sure that the device itself is locked down, right? And we can do that through various means. Through proprietary tools that you, as an end user, have to use to render an email or render a document, read a document. Those tools do a good job of removing the data from the device once that device is lost or stolen, or if it leaves the organization some other way. But where they fall down a bit is the user interface. Users typically don't like a lot of overhead of having their device managed that way. Now there's a trade-off, of course, right? There's always a trade-off for security. The better security you have, often the traditional thinking goes, the harder it is to use. Well, it really shouldn't be like that, we believe. And I think we've done a good job at Microsoft at integrating our tools in to be as seamless for the end user as possible. So, for example, within Office 365 that Mike was talking about, there's a lot of security built into Microsoft's Office 365 suite that many of our customers aren't even aware of. For example, many of you on the call today may have access to multi-factor authentication through an Office 365 subscription and not even realize it. And of course, multi-factor authentication is one of the baseline things that pretty much any security consultant today worth his salt is going to say, if you don't have that deployed, that's probably one of the first and best things you need to do. Multi-factor authentication is also available within our identity and access management part of the mobility suite called Azure Active Directory. Now, first and foremost, Azure Active Directory is not a proposition that you forklift your domain servers into the cloud and run your domain servers there. It's best to think about Azure Active Directory as an extension to your on-prem AD domain services. And those of you, again, already on Office 365 probably already understand that. You're using tools to synchronize the users that you have on-prem in your Active Directory domain to the cloud in order to provision services like Office 365, but now you can also use it to do web identity federation to things like Salesforce or Concur, SAP. There's a gallery now of over 2,800 pre-integrated apps that we can do single sign-on for. And so that's part of Azure Active Directory. Now, it's much more than single sign-on. I talk to customers all the time that have this idea, I guess, in their mind that Azure AD is really just single sign-on. It goes far beyond that. Multi-factor authentication is a good example. Sure, it is available in Office 365, but what we do to go beyond what's available in 365 with Azure AD Premium and multi-factor there is that we can gate access to on-prem resources like VPNs or Radius. Today we can do that with an on-prem version of multi-factor authentication server that's available to you through the same subscription license that you would get the cloud-based multi-factor authentication service. But we have some exciting news there that we now have in preview some capabilities to potentially eliminate that on-prem multi-factor authentication server. And through pointing that cloud-based multi-factor service to your network policy server or NPS services, we can get past having to have an on-prem implementation of multi-factor authentication. It's very flexible. You can work with SMS texts, phone calls, or applications that are both in the Google Play Store and in the Apple stores as well, and very easy to implement. Other things within Azure Active Directory include self-service password reset. Many of my customers indicate that as much as 20% of their help desk calls on a monthly basis are are password resets. And self-service password reset in Azure Active Directory is very easy to deploy and implement and can be a very quick, easy win. Now, those are things that are lots of our customers have maybe other solutions in place for. What I think is exciting about Azure AD are some of the things that you really don't see anywhere else. And what I mean by that is that if you take a step back and think about what's powering Azure Active Directory in our cloud, It's Microsoft's footprint across the globe of all of the enterprise services that we're running on behalf of our corporate customers, but also our consumer services, right? And so we're doing somewhere around, I believe it's 3 billion authentications daily. And we're getting a huge amount of signal from all of the activity across things like Office 365 or Dynamics CRM, any of the services that are in the cloud, including Intune and Azure AD, but also our consumer services like Xbox Live and even Outlook.com. And all of those signals that we can gather become intelligence within something we call the security graph. And this security graph works on your behalf when you're utilizing things like Azure Active Directory and the Enterprise Mobility Suite in order to give you some intelligence that, as I'd mentioned, really you can't get anywhere else. Some examples of that are similar to what your credit card company might do. So for example, if I'm traveling in Italy and I didn't give my credit card company notice that I was going to be there, I may get a call saying, you know, hey, we noticed some charges showing up in Italy. We know that's not where you live. Do you want this to continue? And I can say yes, if that's the case. We do a similar thing with Azure AD called geographic logon or impossible geographic logon. If somebody signs on in San Jose and 20 minutes later signs on in Romania in Eastern Europe, there may be a problem there, right? So we'll raise that as an impossible logon. Other reports that we have include things like leaked credentials. Leaked credentials is a great example of all of the teams that we have behind the scenes here at Microsoft collecting information about the dark parts of the web where things happen, like credentials that are stolen and hacked are put up for sale because credentials are now more valuable than credit cards. So we could literally give you a list on a monthly basis saying that, hey, Acme Corporation, this month we found 14 stolen credentials from your company in a paste bin, right, on dark parts of the web for sale. Now, where this gets very interesting is that we can factor all of this in to something called conditional access. Some of you may be familiar today with conditional access, and maybe you're using other tools. Maybe you're using Active Directory Federation services to do a form of conditional access, right? I only want to let folks from a certain IP address range onto my network, or I want to deny a certain version, certain older versions of Android from connecting at all, because there's just too much risk there. So we can take all of that information that we're getting from the reporting that I'd mentioned and factor that into basically a risk score around access for your remote users. And we can say, for example, if they are logging on from an anonymized browser, right? Why does somebody need to get corporate resources from a Tor browser? Right? Maybe it's not such a good idea. And they're also logging in from a location that they don't normally log in from, right? So we can factor that into a score to be a risk-based score that can then immediately block that user, or you can decide to remediate and say, well, there is something suspect happening here. Maybe I want to apply a second factor of authentication now to that end user, and have them provide that, because it's going to be much more difficult, obviously, for an attacker to have that second form of registered authentication to get access to the network. Right, so that's a very powerful example of how Microsoft is leveraging the power of our cloud and putting machine learning to work in the cloud to analyze all of these signals and bring to you a security graph that powers these solutions. Right, so lots of our customers think about, you know, when we mention enterprise mobility, oh well, we have an MDM solution, we have AirWatch or Mobile Iron, we have Okta or Centrify or Ping for web identity. Maybe we have a DLP solution, but what you're not seeing is the integration and the work that we've done behind the scenes that I've just mentioned, on the cloud that is very much part of all of these services. The other pieces of the Enterprise Mobility Suite here, the Intune piece is very much part of the conditional access mode of access that I talked about as well. It is our MDM solution, and what I would impress about this solution with you here is that, yes, many of our customers do have these mature and existing solutions, and maybe they're midway through contracts with a mobile iron or an AirWatch. But what you can do with Intune specifically for Office 365 goes beyond what any of those solutions can do. And here's the important part, you don't have to rip and replace those solutions necessarily to get the goodness of Intune. So we've implemented mobile application management within Intune in a way that it can be deployed independently from the MDM functions of Intune. Right, so all of the device management stuff that you may be doing today with Zen Mobile or AirWatch or Good Technologies, whatever, you can continue to do that, but you can use Intune to manage Office 365 to get you things like disablement of cut, copy, paste, and save as into non-authorized things like personal cloud storage accounts or even personal email. So that sensitive HR spreadsheet that somebody has received as an attachment, maybe on their personally owned device, you can actually have rules around that that say we don't want that to allow that information to be copied and pasted into non-managed applications. We don't want it to be saved out to a personal email. So you can control all of that within Intune. And again, it can work side by side with an existing MDM solution. Now, you can lock down a device all day long, and we've done a good job of that, as I'd mentioned. It's a very mature market now, the mobile device management market. But the data that's on the device, if it leaves the device, and the end user that has access to that device is sending it outside of your domain, then all of the protections that you've had that were device-based don't really matter now, because the data, which is really the crown jewels of your company, is now out there in the wild and you have no control over it. And of course, that's where things like DLP come in. Now, Microsoft has DLP across a couple of different areas, a few different product areas, more than a couple actually, within our suites, including Office 365 and the Enterprise Mobility Suite, and even Windows itself, the Windows Desktop Operating System. Azure Information Protection is what was Rights Management Services, or RMS. It is persistent encryption, document-based encryption that follows that document wherever it goes. What's new for this is part of that $1 billion that Microsoft spent on security was an acquisition that brought a company called Secure Islands into this product, and what that brought particularly was classification and labeling. And so now we can have labeling of the data in your organization that is critical, for example. You could have priority 1 security top secret documents that can be labeled and have the appropriate controls set on those documents. For example, always encrypted, never allowed to be screen captured, those types of things. So that's Azure Information Protection. The last piece that you see there, Microsoft Cloud App Security, is Microsoft's entry into the CASB market, or Cloud App Security Broker, and yet another acquisition that we've done. And Cloud App Security is able to do a couple of things. It will discover SaaS apps in your organization, and typically companies have a good handle on the ones that they're aware of, but there are typically a few SaaS apps that are accessing corporate data that you don't know about, because it is so simple these days to provision a SaaS app. And employees will do that in order to get their job done, right? They can do it under the radar with a corporate credit card oftentimes, and that application could be running for some time before it's detected. Cloud App Security will detect that application, and for a subset of applications be able to apply policy controls on the data. So for example, I could say I don't want information that's in Office 365 to flow out to Box, or I don't want it to flow out to Salesforce or some other SaaS app. Now you can see a lot of information about the SaaS app within Cloud App Security as well, because a lot of these SaaS apps in its 13,000 application catalog you may not even recognize by name. But Cloud App Security can give you information like Dun & Bradstreet information. Hey, is this even a real company? And the application itself, has it been patched for Heartbleed, for example? And so we give you a nice dashboard to be able to see what's running in the environment and then data policies to lock down what's happening. Now, the last piece before we flip over to Windows here is a good example of how we're integrating our security stack. Cloud App Security and the CASB piece that I just talked about ties into Azure Information Protection because the labeling that we do on documents in the former RMS product, or what is now Information Protection, can now be consumed by Cloud App Security. So if you think about that, if I'm creating an Excel spreadsheet with some sensitive information and I label it as top secret, and now somebody is trying to, with a SaaS app, access that file and send it out to a SaaS provider in the cloud, we can put a halt to that because it'll now consume that label and say, wait, this is something that's under a policy that is top secret. It's not to be sent out to an unknown source like that. Now, there's a lot more in the Enterprise Mobility Suite that we haven't even really touched on the capabilities here, including on-prem breach detection. But I think I'm going to leave that for the next slide. And Vineet, we can go ahead and flip to the next one on the Windows side and talk about that a bit. Because Windows is an important part of the Secure Productive Enterprise. And what I would say about Windows 10 and in the enterprise and the Secure Productive Enterprise and the enterprise version is take a close look at the advanced threat protection in Windows 10. It's actually called Windows 10 Defender Advanced Threat Protection. This is a capability where we have sensors built into the operating system itself that can feed information back to a secure tenant. It's a secure tenant individual or specific to each customer that can, through identifying behavior of the machines that are connected through these sensors, it can identify threats. It can also detonate those files. So much like Advanced Threat Protection in Office 365, the detonation of files is a part of this solution. But what's interesting is that all of the signals that we can gather from different things like threat hunters, so I talked about the different teams that we have here at Microsoft, the Cyber Crimes Unit, continually looking for threats out there. We also work with industry players for collaboration. We have an agreement with FireEye to also feed this solution. All of this is sent back to the tenant to evaluate what's happening. If you do spot some suspicious behavior on an endpoint, you can, in the Advanced Threat Protection within Windows 10, take that information and analyze it and do some deep forensics on what's happening in your environment. You can also feed into that tenant Splunk and ArcSight at this point. There's an API that you can even access as well if you don't have one of those SIEM solutions. So at its core, Windows 10 Enterprise and Advanced Threat Protection is a deep analysis and behavior-based system for identifying threats in your organization today. And I think it's a pretty exciting advancement for Microsoft. The last piece that I would talk about is the ATA, Advanced Threat Analytics piece. Breach detection is becoming more and more important. We have to take a posture of assumed breach. Advanced Threat Analytics is an on-prem solution that working through Active Directory port mirroring is able to also build a behavior profile of your users so that when somebody strays out of that profile, they're flagged and you can remediate as needed. It can also work with SIEM solutions and be fed security logs from SIEM solutions as well as the port mirroring that it does. So Advanced Threat Analytics is a post-breach detection system, assuming that somebody has gotten into the network, and the first thing that they're typically going to try to do is start looking for elevated credentials so they can get what they need to. ATA is going to very, very drastically reduce the window and the time frame that that attacker has in which to work, making it more difficult for them to hang out on your network for, I think the industry average is up to 150, 170 days, something like that. So Advanced Threat Analytics is also a component, I would say, many of you on this call may already own. If you have an enterprise CAL, you own Advanced Threat Analytics. So I would encourage you to look into that. So that's the high level on Windows 10 Enterprise, and I want to leave Vineet some time to kind of talk about the actual offerings that WinWire has. But Secure Productive Enterprise, as you can see from this slide, there's a lot of components to it. I would encourage you to reach out to your WinWire contacts and into your Microsoft account team to really dig into these areas because there's a lot there. We can talk all day long about these components. But we're doing a lot of exciting things, especially in the area of security. So I thank WinWire for having us today. And Vineet, I would hand it back over to you.
Jim and Mike, thank you very much for that in-depth overview of all the technologies. I know we can keep on going and helping customers understand each of those areas, and it will certainly require a lot more time. As you said, what we are showing right now is how Microsoft is looking at packaging all the great features and functionality that are being talked about into two groups of plans, which you as an enterprise can leverage and have those capabilities. There's a lot more to know about this as you look at the SPE website, and we will be happy to further clarify that. In the last few minutes that are left, I do want to talk about how do you get started with all this. All this information that you have learned today or come to know, right, is great. How do you actually look at getting this into real action and implementation? So one of the first offers that I want to talk about, and we at WinWire have multiple offerings around how we can help you as a customer plan your security implementation. But the first step in that is assessment. And this is an important set of activities that our certified architects and consultants work with your security group and look at your current configurations. How are you currently using Office 365 and Azure? You may have been using it for 6 months, you may have been using it for 5 years. Whatever is the current setup, make sure that we understand it and come back to you with a comprehensive recommendations on how you can improve and leverage all the great things that Mike and Jim just told you about in different sort of levels of implementation. So it'll be more like a roadmap, right? However, there are tools and technologies that we'll talk about that we use, and one of them I'll talk about that you see highlighted out there called Microsoft Secure Score. Many of us, I'm sure all of us, are very used to looking at our credit scores. It's very similar to that on how Secure Score can actually give you a rating or a score for where you are in your security implementation journey. We will, of course, work with your key folks from the security, from the IT team, and understand, right, what are the implementations that are possible and not possible. Typically, it takes a couple of weeks, and we work on site with you. And the interesting part is it's of course no cost to you. Talking about Secure Score, which may be very interesting to you, this is a new service over the last few months that Microsoft has been introducing. This is more around reporting on how your security configurations are being set up today. Right? This is certainly looking at Office 365 and all of its components, right? And this tells you specific action items that you should take, right? And we leverage this tool when we are doing the assessment, apart from the other discussions and other, understanding of your business needs for security, right? This tool gives a very objective view of here are the best practices that you need to look at it, and we can certainly plan out what all implementations are possible. Just as an example, I'll tell you, as Jim talked about, multi-factor authentication is a feature that you could enable for everybody in the organization, right? And you will have a high security in your organization. But we know how rollout and adoption of that could be problematic, right? So maybe you only want multi-factor authentication to be rolled out to people who are managing your environment, the administrators, maybe certain key execs who interact and work with sensitive data within your organizations, right? We come to those kinds of conclusions and provide you the specific recommendations and saying, maybe these are the only 10 or 12 people that need multi-factor authentication. So you are still able to secure maximum amount of features and functional data in your organization, right? And you may not need to do everything. However, what this tool lets you do is assess where are you in that journey and what are your objectives. I'll be happy to show you a demo of it in a subsequent session, which we'll do. Or as we engage, we'll be happy to talk about. But you see the slider at the bottom, you of course also can set your objectives, right? You probably don't want all the settings because it may actually hamper productivity. It has to be customized to your scenario. So as I go back, I re-emphasize the assessment engagement that our consultants and architects get involved, help you think through, help us understand what you currently have, what are your needs, use the tools, and come back with a specific set of recommendations on how you can enhance the security configurations that are there. As I said, the offer is available to all of you. You can contact us at marketing@winwire.com or even your Microsoft rep for a free cloud security assessment, compliance assessment. This is something that Winwire consultant will deliver, and then we can look at, once we create that roadmap, and I want to give you a brief overview, but you can of course contact us for more details. I want to just give you a view of all the other offerings that are there. We'll be happy to send you more information for you to circulate within your organization. There are other offerings where we can again get involved into doing an on-premises security and compliance assessment. Maybe you are not leveraging Azure, maybe you are not using a lot of cloud features and technologies, but you are looking at moving towards that, right? How to even plan looking at your current configurations for your on-premises infrastructure. We of course have an offering around that too. And you will anyway get these slides, so you'll get all this information. Many of our experience working with customers is after the assessment, we look at a particular pilot engagement, which is where a specific feature is identified. You heard lots of features, but maybe single sign-on is very important to you, or implementing the information right management, which is DLP, or the DLP. These are important to you, and you want to really understand how is this going to work in my production environment, right? That's where we again engage with you to help you try and make sure that it's really providing the value to you. There are also cases where you may want to try out EMS, as Jim was mentioning. There are organizations that are using AirWatch or many other tools, and they may want to look at what is it that Microsoft EMS or EM plus S provides, and make sure that that is providing a better ROI. It's integrated with the rest of the infrastructure that you're investing in, and it's something that can potentially replace your current MDM and MAN solution, and we will help you go through the proof of concept and come up with a clear plan how over the next few days, weeks, you could potentially look at doing that. And as I said, in the interest of time, in the last 5 minutes, I do want to keep for any Q&A. I'll leave this slide out there. If you do think that this is something that your organization can benefit, please contact us. Please contact if you have your Microsoft rep, and how we can come and help you in talking about your security assessment needs and help you go through the entire process and take the benefits of the SPE suite platform. Thank you very much for attending and joining this webinar. I will hand it over back to Noor to see if there are any Q&A questions that I or Jim or Mike can answer. But as I said, we'll be happy to answer anything offline or emails too.
Thank you, Vineet. Thank you, Mike, Jim, for taking us through the in-depth SPE suite. Yes, there are a couple of questions. I know we have 3 more minutes. So if, like when we were discussing about SPE, E3 and E5, can you, at the high level, will be able to differentiate what are the basic difference in the features? Yeah.
Sure. Let me take the Enterprise Mobility Suite first, Noor. The differences are Azure Active Directory Premium in E5 includes the risk-based conditional access that I talked about. It also includes a piece that I didn't really mention, and that is privileged identity management for Azure and Office 365. So privileged administrative access, so giving just-in-time access for your administrators for Azure and Office 365. The classification and labeling that I mentioned in the previous RMS product, now called Azure Information Protection, is also part of the E5 suite. As well as the Cloud App Security, that's our CASB solution, right? So the ability to find SaaS apps and put data controls over them is also an E5 capability. Those are kind of the 3 primary areas, right? So risk-based conditional access, classification and labeling and information protection, and then a SaaS-based discovery and data control tool in our CASB solution.
Thanks, Jim. So is there any pricing information about these 2 suites?
Pricing information is really dependent on the type of agreement that you have. What I would say for that is probably reach out to your Microsoft team, and we can get you pricing on those things.
Thanks, Jim. So the other question what I have for the day is what are the on-prem capable rights for SPE?
The on-prem capability rights for SPE. Is that particular to Office 365?
That's right, yeah.
So Mike, is that something you're able to answer as far as what on-prem rights for Office 365 would be included through if you were to deploy SPE?
I think the dual rights still apply to SPE. In fact, one of the things that we did not mention here is with SPE 3 or 5, you also do get access to, for example, the Enterprise Skype server component, along with the Enterprise SharePoint and Exchange server components for on-premise with no charge. So that is one of the added benefits of going with the SPE suite. If you'd like more information on that, we encourage you to reach out to Winwire and the account team, and we can talk more detail.
Yeah, thanks, Jim. That's right. I know we are almost at the end, and I would like to thank you everyone for taking time to join this webinar, and I hope you found it informative. Again, thanks Vineet, Jim, Mike for taking us through this wonderful session. Have a good day everyone. Thanks for joining.
Thanks everyone. Take care.
Thank you.